Hey Vette heads, and welcome back to iDrive Daily. I'm actually enjoying more vacation time and spending a lot of wonderful time up here in the Poconos. But you know what? We're going to continue the second part of our series in love-hate relationship with daily driving my C5 Corvette. So without further ado, let's get out of here and talk. Let's talk about the 5 things I dislike about my C5 Corvette. So much like the last video on 5 things I love about my C5 Corvette, this video is going to focus on some of it being directly related to daily driving my Corvette, and some of it being more generally related to just owning a Corvette. So, you know, when I started writing this list, I realized that it's a lot easier to write a list on things you dislike about something. And I think it's because those things bother you so much, you're constantly thinking about them. Now, that's definitely true for some of the items on the list, not all of them, but some of these items on the list are definitely things that bother me a lot. The very first thing is the amount of gaps in this car. I have to be honest with you, when I first got this car, I thought the interior was actually messed up from the previous owner. I thought that maybe this car was in an accident. The longer I owned it, the more I started to worry. You know, like maybe this car was in an accident and that's why there's these atrocious gaps everywhere. And it's not just the interior, you know, it's the exterior. There's gaps between body panels. And it's just, it's annoying. It really is. But you know what? The more I look at it, the more it kind of fades in the background. It doesn't quite bother me as much as it used to. I guess I've just gotten used to it. I mean, we're talking about the early 90s, or I'm sorry, the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's clear that like corners were cut. That's just, you know, that is definitely something that bothers me. I know it bothers a lot of people out there too. You see it a lot on forums. People bring it up. And there are, of course, ways to fix it, whether it's piping that goes around those gaps to kind of seal them up a little bit. You know, I'm not going to go crazy and do all of that, but that is definitely something that bothers me about this car. Number 2, so it always bothered me when I had a dirty car, especially if it was a car I really liked and enjoyed owning. It's definitely become much more apparent now that I've had my Corvette for a while. I realized that shortly after I got it, that when the car became dirty, I became upset. Like, I really wanted to get out and wash the car. There's the fact that you have to actually physically go out and wash the car. That's not what I'm complaining about. It's the fact that the car even gets dirty. I don't like the car being dirty, which means I have to wash it more. I am actually stuck behind an incredible slowpoke doing 30 in a 45. Pretty amazing if you ask me, but nonetheless, that is something I do hate, people who drive under the speed limit. I don't hate the person, let's be clear. I hate the action. But let's talk about the car. Again, the action of cleaning it, I don't mind so much, although it does get kind of annoying when you start doing it every weekend. But I've kind of learned to internalize a little bit of that annoyance and push it out to every 2 weeks in the summer. In the winter, it goes a little bit longer because it's winter and it's usually generally very cold, at least in the Philadelphia area. But it does annoy me when the car gets dirty. And you know what? Beyond that, there are certain locations on the car that are notoriously dirty and difficult to clean. The wheel wells, for example, that body panel that stretches a little bit around the wheel wells, for whatever reason, stays insanely dirty, no matter how hard I scrub it. I guess I got to figure out what to do with them. But nonetheless, that is definitely something that bothers me about daily driving my Corvette. So the next thing we're going to talk about, number 3, I think this bothers everybody, no matter what type of car you drive, but it has become really bad since I've bought a Corvette, and that is potholes. Potholes are never a good thing. They're incredibly annoying. I do my best to swerve to avoid them. Sometimes I don't, and I hit it, and it's painful, and I cringe inside. And if I can find the meme that describes what it feels like when you hit a pothole, I will put it in the video. But it sucks. And now that I've owned a Corvette, I've just become much more aware of where they are. I tend to try to remember on my commute where they are so that I can give myself enough time to avoid them. And I tend to focus a little bit more on the road so that I can see them upcoming and give myself a good chance at avoiding them. So the very next thing that kind of annoys me is the view out of this car. It's not terrible most of the time. Most of the time you actually have a really nice view of everything with all the glass you're surrounded with. But quite honestly, the pillar back here does block some of your blind spot, and it's fairly annoying. And it's also because you're sitting so low, when you pull up to a red light, you're leaning over to see if the light has changed. Or sometimes I flip this down and lean back to look out the target top. But you know what? Like, I just find that very annoying. It's something I've gotten used to, and it is what it is. But it sucks when you're daily driving your Corvette and you're doing that a lot. None of this has been a deal breaker so far. And the fifth thing won't be either. So number 5. So there's not too much to say about this. The Corvette is still a special car to me. I absolutely love it. But daily driving it has actually caused me to think, to kind of remove it off its pedestal. I don't know how to explain it other than that. You see, before I owned my own Corvette and my dad had his, it was a garage keeper. I'll fully admit that. We put a few miles on it a year, and that was his goal when he bought his car, was to just kind of enjoy it from time to time. It wasn't a daily driver. And you know what? I respect it. I get it. I may not agree with it, but I understand why people do that. Nonetheless, because of that, I guess, having it seen that way, it was always like a special car to me. It was a car you took out on weekends, on sunny days. It was a sports car. It was a car that won races. It was on a pedestal for me. And it's not to say that the Corvette still isn't on a pedestal, but there are times I get in it and I honestly forget what I'm driving. Whether I'm just thinking about what's going on the road, or I'm just stressed about what's going on at work, or thinking about something I'm doing after work, or worried about what's for dinner, things like that, I tend to forget that I'm enjoying myself in the Corvette. And you know what? That's fine. It's something that happens occasionally, and it's not something that happens a lot, so I'm okay with it. But that being said, I wish it didn't happen at all, honestly. Of course, those are 5 things I hate about my Corvette. Again, totally none of them are a deal breaker. I absolutely love driving my Corvette as much as I can. Getting in it, it feels fantastic. Especially when you're on back roads like I am today. Just a lot of fun to drive. Do I suggest you buy a C5 Corvette? Yeah, if it's in your budget and it's definitely you're looking for a sports car, I definitely would put it on the list. They're very affordable. That being said, there is a third part to this series. Now, I know what you're thinking. Matt, we talked about things you love. We talked about things you hate. What is quite possibly the third part? So the third part is just going to be things that don't really fall into either category. Things that don't bother me a ton, but are things that I either hated at one time or loved at one time and have since kind of warmed to them or chilled to them, however you want to look at it. So we're going to talk about that in the third part. See you on the next episode.